Oh, what a very, very good morning to you, and welcome to Quilting Craft. I'm Jennie Rayment. I've got the lovely Jennie Rayment with me.
The two Jens.
The two Jens,
yes, it's
exactly.
the Jen show.
It's the Jen show. Well, actually, it's the Jennie Rayment show because it is the Quilting Classroom. You have got an hour of luxury with our lovely Jennie taking you through the Quilting Classroom as well. There's lots in the show. If you do want to order anything that Jennie's using, please make sure you do order on the website, all the W's, quiltingcraft.tv, and on the phones 09056 480 480. Jennie, it's lovely to have you.
And nice to have you as well. It really is. On this lovely day.
I know.
But we're going to do sewing. You see? So they're all sitting out there. They've got their cup of tea.
Yep.
They're in their jammies, or
Ready
hopefully, or their dressing gowns, or they've got dressed, and they walk the dog, and they're waiting to learn how to make a tablecloth. But we've got some super fabric, haven't we?
We have super fabric. Shall we have a look at the fabric we're going to be using in the show as well? This is beautiful. Now, this is the English tea garden. English garden tea or English tea garden?
Well, it's something like that.
English
I
tea
thought
garden.
it was strawberries and cream.
English tea garden. The quilting. This is beautiful.
Isn't it lovely?
Oh,
You've got
my
a metre
word.
of the pink, which I'm going to use for the background of the tablecloth.
Yes.
And then the petal pattern shapes I'm going to put in the centre, and the hearts I'm making from this one, and then I'm bordering it in that. So I'm using all of those fabrics. So you've got a metre of that, a half metre of that, and a half metre of that. So 2 metres of fabric. Lovely cotton fabrics, really nice to work with.
286558 is the item number. The club price on this is £15.29. The P&P is 77 pence because we are celebrating smash hits here.
Hey,
yes,
77, I didn't know that.
Everything in the show.
Oh, quick,
everything.
buy it all.
I know.
Quick.
And because we're celebrating, of course, 77. It was Wimbledon, the 77 years before a British man won again.
And I'm not 77, so we're celebrating that. And you're not 77 either, so we're celebrating that.
Yeah, we're celebrating that as well. We like that idea.
Yes.
And you were only born in 77. There you go.
No, see? Yeah, well, I wasn't quite. 77, less a bit. Not quite less 77.
If you do want to go for these, all the details are on there. Everything that Jennie will be using in the show is also on the website. Something else I want to show you. We've got the fat quarters, these, scrumptious English tea garden. These are beautiful.
Yes, you've got flutterbys and flowers, and they're 9 different fat quarters, because the idea was to either use them for a Sudoku or Sudoku, call it what you will. You don't actually have to do one. We'll tell you all about it, probably on the 11 o'clock show. Or you could use them for literally anything. There's so many different designs that you can use 9 fat quarters for. There are not 77, okay? But if you bought 9 of them, you'd have more than 77, wouldn't you? You'd have a few spare. So you could celebrate 77 and have some left over.
And don't forget, 77 pence P&P. Now, I just want to show you actually some inspiration because this is too beautiful to pass. It is over here, first of all, the fat quarters. That is just stunning. It's when you walk in, we walked into the studio this morning and we saw this. It's just wow.
Well, it was real fun. Beautiful. It is squares. I did it so that those people who are really worried about doing patchwork can just sew squares together. Yeah. And in fact, as you'll see, there are quite a lot of different ways of doing it. That is the Babs design, because Babs, a student of mine, came up with that thought. But there is the Anne design, which is another possibility. So you see, or there is probably the Jennie design, or there is the throw it all up in the air, scrummage around a bit, stitch them together. There you are.
That's coming up at 11 o'clock. Today, behind us, of course, is the beautiful tablecloth that you're going to be able to make along, of course, with our lovely Jennie today. Don't forget, you're going to need the materials that we have in the show, and if you do want to order them, all the details are there. Brand new today, 286558. The good news is, you're going to be with Jennie now for a little while, and I'm going to let you get on with this.
You can have a sit down.
I'm going to go and have a sit down. I'm going to learn.
70s, and how? Right, learn on, woman.
There you go, Jennie. Thank you
kindly.
very much. Thank you.
Right. Are we sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. It's a tablecloth. Thinking about various different things to do, and thought we haven't done a tablecloth. Now, there are many times that you might want to use a tablecloth on the table, for instance. I have to confess, we use our tablecloth most nights on the floor because we have a carpet picnic, because we sit down, and we're not yet 77, on the floor and actually have our supper, lunch, whatever it happens to be, because then we can watch the telly and we can watch reruns of Create and Craft and watch myself whilst we have our supper. But enough of that burble. How are you going to do it? Well, move number 1 is you'll need to cut a large square. And on the tablecloth behind me, the centre panel here is formed by taking a 32.5-inch square, appliquing various shapes. I've got hearts here, and I've used the petal pattern shape to make the large arrangement in the middle. And then round the edge, I've used the Flying Goose template to make these rather nice shapes, although if it worries you, there is another option. And then finally, because I thought, hey, come on, it's English tea garden, you should have something a little bit special, I've added a scalloped edge to it using the scallop tool. And then obviously bound it with bias binding made on the bias binding maker. So that's the rough plan. Now you don't have to have it exactly like that, but I'm going to take you through how I made it. Move number one was to prepare a large square. Now, I'm fortunate at home, I have a very big cutting mat, but you may not have such a big cutting mat. And how do you cut a 32.5-inch square easily when you've only got a 24-inch cutting mat or even smaller? I would initially press my fabric, and I'm just going to show you this roughly. If you take your material and fold it in half, and I'd fold it in half lengthwise, lining up the selvages. Do be a little careful when you're cutting out your various bits and pieces for all of the ideas in the show, the designs, simply because you've got a finite amount of fabric, unless, of course, you want to buy double, then either you could make a bigger tablecloth or you could take advantage of the 77p offer. Having ironed the fabric, which you will of course do, if you line up the selvages and then fold the fabric in half again, making a nice neat little package, I would initially level the end off, and this is where the rotary cutter is so invaluable. Any one of the rulers, if you're short on space, then the slightly smaller ruler, the 12.5 by 6.5 inch one, might be better. If you've got more space, then you might want to go for the larger one. I'd bring the ruler to the very end of the fabric and just level everything off. So guard off the cutter and just level it off. Now, we need to have, or you need to have, a 32.5-inch piece. How are you going to arrange it? If you take the fabric, turn it round, place it on the cutting mat, level it up with the 0 end here, decide on a measurement that is less than 32.5. And what I would very often do is go for something like 20. And I'll mark the fabric across there. Now you could mark it either with one of the vanishing pens. You could have been sensible and had the fabric the other way out and marked it on the underside. You could put a piece of tape across here. But if you mark the fabric on both sides at, say, the 20, then you simply move the fabric along, realign the 20 mark with the 0, and you can then cut the rest of the fabric off at 32.5. And if you want to know the answer, you take 20 from 32.5. And what is the answer? I can see you getting all your fingers out. 12.5. So having moved my 20 mark to the 0, take your rotary cutting ruler, line it up with 12.5 and cut. And a word of caution, before you do any cutting, think about it, consider it, then cut. It's very easy to not be able to take 20 from 32.5 and get a funny number. And believe you me, if you try to do anything really complicated like dividing 32.5 in half and measuring 2 lots of 16.25, forget it, it doesn't work. So that is how you can use your mat to cut any size of shape. Fold it, trim it off, line it up with a 0, make one measurement, move it along, make the next measurement. So I'm going to assume you have managed to cut a 32.5-inch square. And there it is. Now, for those of you who perhaps want a really easy life, you needn't do anything else. You can just leave this and add a border. You've got a tablecloth. But I decided that I really wanted to use the lovely, lovely fabric that in fact has ice cream on it. These are ice cream cones. Now, this is a directional fabric, and it will pay you to make certain that you cut out the various pieces carefully. It is directional. You're going to now be using the petal pattern template, and this is the petal pattern template. What I have done with the petal pattern template is I will cut round the entire shape. But if you didn't want such a large centre decoration, there's no reason why you couldn't use just part of the petal pattern, and you'd end up with something that looked like the petal pattern on the front of the bag we have over here. And on that little bag, I actually used a smaller section of the petal pattern. I just reduced the size of it. So if you felt that the centre of my tablecloth is a bit big, then cut a smaller section. How you will cut it out is place the template on the fabric. Now, cut your fabric out carefully because there is enough fabric here to do the petal pattern centre, all the hearts, and indeed the binding round the outside edge if you are careful. And one is being careful because of the fact it's a directional material. Lay the template on the fabric. Now, for those of you who are worried about using the rotary cutter, there's no reason why you can't draw round with a pencil. Use one of the pencils we've got on the show. We've got a wonderful lot of quilting template pencils there. And then cut it out with scissors. Or you could, if you preferred, cut round it with the rotary cutter. Cutting around it with the rotary cutter can be a little awkward because when you get to the top, you can't come round the other side. So it pays, in that case, to either turn the fabric or the board round. But you will need 8 of these shapes. And bear in mind, it is directional, this fabric. So if you want all your ice creams coming outwards, then have them all going the same way. Don't do as I did initially because I didn't look at it and I had some up one way, some up the other. Now, presuming you have cut 8 shapes. Now, I know some of you have actually seen this sample before, but it's been a week. It has been such a week. I spent Monday to Thursday being granny. That meant crawling around on the floor with the grandchildren. I've now learned how to do a tantrum. I can do a tantrum really well. Don't ask me to show you. So if you cut out 8, now you may choose to use the fabric we got on the show, which is absolutely superb fabric, or you might choose to use scraps. And if you're going to use scraps, think about using 2 colours. So having cut out 8 of the petal template, take 2 of the shapes, and I'm deliberately using 2 different colours so you can see how they go together. Lay one on top of the other, aligning it. You are going to sew the 2 together, and it's important to start this end rather than that end, simply because it would be rather nice if all our points met in the centre, and the outside edge we can fudge. Moving to the sewing machine. Now, I've got the little silver sewing machine here, and I must admit I was delighted this morning to discover I can set this machine at exactly 1/4 of an inch. Now, I'm just going to swing it round slightly more so that the camera can pick up the stitch width here. And on the stitch width here, if he comes in really close, you might see, I'm afraid, I've made a tiny weeny pencil mark. Because on this machine, if you're in stitch number 1, you can move the needle from one side to the other using your stitch width button, and you can set it at exactly 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of the presser foot. This is the needle position. And because it's not on quite one of the dots, I put a little pencil mark. Now, don't panic, everybody in the studio. This will actually wipe off. If this were my sewing machine, I'd probably put a more permanent mark there. And having got these 2 together, this sets my needle at exactly 1/4 of an inch from that edge of the presser foot, which is brilliant. So it means I haven't got to change the foot. I can stay with the regular foot that I've got on. Right, move it back a little bit. And I anticipate, everybody out there, you do not have to do this standing slightly at one edge and also on one foot. It's fine with foot control. Right, I've got the 2 petal pattern shapes together, and I'm going to sew from the centre down the edge 1/4 of an inch. Trying to keep it nice and level. Edge of presser foot on the edge of the fabric all the way down. And just keep on going. And remember, if you are sitting in front of it at home, your nose should technically be in front of the sewing machine, lined up with the take-up lever. Keep on going, keep on going. When you get down to the bottom, don't forget the little scrap, the good old thread saver. Any old scrap of fabric will do, so I'm retrieving it from the back, stuff it on the front. Now, if you were going to make the petal pattern, you would do what is called chain piecing. Pick up the next lot, shove it under, pick up the next lot, shove it under, sew off one, onto the other, onto the other, onto the other. It saves thread. At the stage now where you've stitched the 2 pieces together, you will go on and repeat this and make 4 sets of the 2. Having made 4 sets of the 2, you will take 2 of the 4 sets. And a little word of caution, if you're working in 2 colours, believe you me, I have done this, and it pays to sew the pieces together in the same order. So you'll always have the other colour or one of the colours on the top. Don't flip it over and do one side and one the other side, because you won't get the colours alternating. And then you'll have to unpick it and then you'll curse. Having got it together as 4 sets of 2, I'll take 2 of the sets and I'm going to stitch those together to make 1/2 of the design. Now, I've pressed the seams open and flat simply because I think it makes a better end result and you don't get a ledge in the work, and it will actually lie flatter on the tablecloth. So you're going to take these 2 pieces, line them up and sew them together, again working from the centre. So back underneath the machine, hold it there on the machine, that's it. So off your little mark, down there and right the way down to the bottom. When you've done that with 1/2, you'll do exactly the same thing with the other half, i.e. you'll stitch the other 2 pieces together. So down the bottom there, onto that, retrieve your thread saver, stuff him back on again. And if in the course of the quilting classrooms you haven't learned how to use a thread saver, then you ain't been watching it closely enough. Right, you've now got 1/2 of the petal pattern design. You will construct the other half of the petal pattern design. And what I like particularly about this template is that when you sew the pieces together and you get your seam allowance correct, from the edge there to the top of the pieces, the points, is 1/4 of an inch. And that's what we're after. If you haven't got 1/4 of an inch, it will pay you to undo it and fiddle it a bit. When you've got the 2 halves, all you're simply going to do then is sew the 2 halves together. So put them right sides together and sew all the way along this edge. And it would be really rather nice if the points lined up in the middle. Now, I'm not going to do this because A, it'll take too much time, and B, if I mess it up, you'll notice I haven't got my points together. But fortuitously, thanks to the wonders of modern science, I've actually got one here that I prepared earlier. And notice, those of you who are being particularly picky on this lovely sunny morning, that the points are beautifully together in the centre. And that happens because the template is very accurate and it's easy to sew, particularly with a little silver machine and its accurate seam allowance. I could, at this stage, just plonk the design on the centre of my tablecloth and hand turn or satin stitch or anchor the edge down. But that, because it's an arc, is effort. I don't do effort. The trick to getting that nice edge beautifully arced and turned under is to use some interfacing or a very thin fabric. It really wouldn't matter. Place the interfacing so that the design is right side down onto the interfacing. Pin it well, and here is where the flower pins are lovely. Plenty of pins. And if you put your pins in with the pins going outwards, you're helping to push the fibres out. All you're going to do then is to sew round the very edge with the presser foot following round the arc of the petal pattern all the way round the entire thing, stitching it firmly to the interfacing, and please let it be sew in, not iron on, because otherwise it'll stick when you press it, or any very thin material. It could be a thin bit of muslin. When you've sewn all the way around the edge, and again here's one I did earlier, you will end up with the design firmly fixed to the interfacing. Now, panic not. It doesn't matter that it's fixed the interfacing, because how you're going to turn it through is initially cut right the way around the outside and trim off all that excess interfacing. So cut round. This is not something I would choose to do with the rotary cutter, because if you're a little bit wobbly, then you might cut part of the design. Not only do I cut round the edge, but I'll also nick it at the junction here. Be careful when you nick it, because if you over nick, you might cut a little hole in the seam. Having cut all the way around, and I won't bother to go any further, all you then need to do is to slit the interfacing on the right side. Make a little hole. Having made a little hole, you simply turn it through the gap and turn the entire thing through the gap. It will, of course, have been trimmed off on all of the edges. Poke it out. Now, this is where one of the best tools that is around these days is this particular poker, the bamboo pointer and creaser. There's a pack of 9 different things that you can see on the website. We'll also give you the details on the 11 o'clock show that has the bamboo pointer. It's got the 1/4 inch masking tape, it's got the pins, etc., and a whole load of other very useful things. This is remarkably good for stuffing up the orifice, and there's nothing wrong with the word orifice, and I can hear you all tittering, and just literally giving it a good poke round the outside edge there. Having poked it all out, press it really well and thanks to the wonder of modern science. Here's one I did earlier. It's at this stage now where you can apply it to your tablecloth. Now, when it comes to getting the thing right in the middle, a little trick. If you take your tablecloth and you press it in half this way, north and south, open it out and press it in half the other way, making squares, then press it in half on the diagonal, there isn't really enough room in the studio for everything, and press it in half on the other diagonal, you will end up with a whole load of creases. Now, this is very clear on the PDF. And the PDF you'll find that has all the words on it and the measurements is either on the Quilting Classroom on createandcraft.tv's website, or you'll find it on the front page of my website, jennierayment.com. This is going to be plonked in the middle, and if you've pressed it north and south, west and east, and on the diagonals, you can line up the design with the creases. When it comes to applying it, this could be done by hand, or you could use the sewing machine. And here, the little silver will actually do a remarkably good job, because one of the stitches you could use is the stitch that's here. Let's turn this around a little bit. Stitch setting number 11. Or if you wanted to, there's no reason why you couldn't do a decorative stitch and use something like that to go round the edge. Pin it well and then stitch round the edge to get it. Let's get that round a little bit more than you can see. So, petal pattern gets applied to centre. I thought, though, what would be rather nice before I applied it to tuck some pooky bits underneath there. And if we look at the one I've got on the wall, you will notice I've got some little green bits tucked in. They poke out, hence the reason for calling them pooky bits. These are made from rectangles of fabric, say 2 inches by 3. How do you make them? If you take a small rectangle of fabric, and let's just find the real one here, and literally it's a 2 inch by 3 inch piece, fold about ½ an inch over down one long edge, fold it then so you form a triangle, so bring it over to there and over to there, and literally put a couple of stitches along the base there to hold all the layers together. And here again, chain piece, make a whole row of them. Just cut this one up. So these little pieces can be tucked underneath the petal pattern. Now let me put the right one that I made in the centre and show you how you tuck them in. So let's get rid of that. Open this out, lay my real strawberries in the middle there, or ice creams, and these little bits can get tucked underneath there, just so that the little point sticks out, pokes out. You can see why it's called a pokey bit or a pooky bit, and you'll get a very nice effect. Now you could have 8 of them, one underneath each of the petals, or you could just have 4 of them. And they could, of course, be in a completely different contrasting colour, as I've got in the green, or you could use a scrap of something else. And that, I thought, just finished it off. Now, in addition to having the petal pattern in the middle, which could be used by itself, you could use the petal pattern as a table mat. You could indeed apply it to a cushion cover. And I've got the petal pattern here, not only on the bag done a little smaller, but also as a cushion cover front there. So you could use the petal pattern as just a design by itself. But we don't want to give you just the petal pattern. We want to do something else. How about a few hearts? Now, there's a really, really super easy to use heart template. Let's move these pieces out of the way. And the heart template has the advantage of giving you a correct heart shape. One of the difficult things to do in life is to actually draw around a heart very easily. And the Easy Heart template gives you 5 different sizes of hearts. And indeed, there's no reason why you can't have half a heart or a whole heart. You can be wholehearted or half-hearted about it, depending on how you fancy. How do you use the template? You would use the template like this. I use the same interfacing trick that I used on the petal pattern. If you take interfacing or thin fabric, what I do initially is to draw a straight line across the material, and that's where any of the pens that we've got on the show will suffice. So draw a straight line. Having drawn a straight line across the fabric, if you then take the heart template and place the line in the middle on that drawn line, you can choose as to your size of heart. Now, I chose to use the one in the middle. You may feel it was a little large, and with hindsight, I think perhaps the smaller one, the D, might have been better. It would also have saved a fraction more fabric. but I'm staying with the one that I went with simply because that's the one I started with. You're then going to draw round, we had a pencil a bit sharper, round the outside edge through the crack. Having drawn round the outside edge and the centre line is lined up with the drawn line on the interfacing, simply flip it over, replace it and redraw it for the other half of the heart. So draw around there. This is going to give you a beautifully drawn and accurate heart shape. Having drawn your accurate heart shape, the trick now is to apply it to the fabric. So all you do is take the fabric that you've got and lay the heart-shaped template on the top. Now, where did I throw the material? Where's my lovely bit of fabric gone to? You're going to, there it is. Ah dear, these things just move. There's gremlins in the studio. When you come to put the heart interfacing shape on the fabric, remember it goes on the right side of the material. Lay it on the fabric and cut out very roughly, having pinned the layers together. So pin layers, cut out roughly. When you've cut out roughly, you'll never guess what you're going to do. Yep, you've got it in one. You're going to sew all the way round that drawn outline of the heart. And this trick for getting an accurate applique can be used with all sorts of different fabrics. Draw it on the interfacing, put it on the right side of the material, sew round the drawn line. And if you sew round the drawn line with a small stitch, you can then cut back all the layers really close to the edge. And with the heart, I'd cut it back all the way round, not only trim it off, but put a few little nicks, particularly on the curved area, and 100% nick it through there. But don't cut through the fabrics or through the stitching. Having cut all the material off all the way around, and you will do it properly, won't you? Yes, miss. All you're going to do then is make a little hole in the interfacing and do it carefully. Don't just stick your scissors in and hack, because you might go through the back as well. So cut the interfacing. It doesn't matter how you cut the interfacing. And all you're going to do then is turn it through. So turn it through the hole. And when you turn it through the hole, you will poke it out, and you'll never guess the tool I'm going to use to poke it out, that bamboo pointer and creaser. Really useful tool for getting up and making things beautifully rounded. So that's it. And the pointy part you can use to poke out the end of the heart shape, but do it gently. Don't ram it up there, because you might poke it right through the entire end. Once you've got your hearts done, and I did 4 of them, these 2 can be applied to the tablecloth centre. And I had mine, one there, one there, one there, and one there. I chose to have them this way round, so they're pointing towards the outside, but I could have had them that way round, and I could have put them there and there and there. I could have made 8 of them and made them smaller. So this is your choice. You know, you're the person who's going to be using the tablecloth. You can have more hearts or less hearts or no hearts at all. You don't have to be half-hearted about it. Right, having got the hearts done, let's move these bits out of the way. What are we going to look at next? Well, the next thing to look at is the border. Now, I have on the wall got the border of the flying geese, and this is the flying geese border, the border that goes round here. But for some of you, you might think, oh, I don't want that. I've had enough. I've done the hearts, I've done the petal pattern, I've applied it, I don't want to do any more. Well, there's no reason why you can't use the green fabric, and forgive me for not showing you it done in the green, but I just didn't have enough material. But if you cut the green fabric up into 4 equal pieces, you could actually apply the green fabric, and this is completely going to obscure me, round the edge of your centre panel. What I would do on the corners is to cut out squares of whatever the width of the strip was that I'd put round my centre panel. So if you literally take your green material here, cut it into 4 strips. Now, when you come to cut it, my friends, you will cut it across the fabric this way, that way. So each of the 4 strips will have part of the selvage. Nobody's going to cut it that way, are you? No, miss. Good. I'm glad you're all listening, right? Have another sip of your coffee and keep concentrating. Having cut this into 4 strips, the easy way to do it then is to apply 1 strip to either side, opposite sides, and then you attach the corners to the remaining 2 strips. And that will give you a cop-out for doing the piecing. But if you don't want a cop-out, let's go for making the flying goose border. So move that out the way. Never have enough space here. Right, when it comes to making the flying goose border, we have the template for you. This is the Easy Goose template. And the Easy Goose template does not only the half square triangle for the corners of the goose, it does the quarter square triangle. Now you might be saying to yourself, what on earth is a flying goose? Flying goose is a patchwork construction. And it's a design that ends up as an oblong or a rectangle. That is a flying goose. And the flying goose itself, and this is where it can get a bit complicated, but don't worry your heads about it, is actually composed of a quarter square triangle and a half square triangle. And that's the important thing about the flying goose. If you use the right sorts of triangles cut out in the right way, you will end up with a block that is all beautifully firm on all the edges. If you inadvertently cut the triangles out wrong, i.e. you cut these as quarters and that's as a half, your block won't be stable. And the template I've got here will ensure that that is how they get cut out correctly. The flying goose itself is composed of one center triangle, which is a half square triangle, and that is using the pink sections of the template, that way. The corner parts are actually made using the blue writing on the template. And they are cut out, let's get it round the right way so you can all see it, cut out using the blue lines on the template. Now, to make life easier, and I must confess, I think this is a very well-designed bit of kit, is on the end here, you can see the shapes that have been coloured in solid in blue represent the corners of the goose. The shape this end, where it's been coloured in pink, represents the middle section of the goose. So it is not difficult to get the right pieces in the right place. So to make one goose, you want one pink triangle and 2 blue triangles. And the blue triangles have to be cut from the fabric folded in half. You must have a mirror image. And then basically how the block gets put together to make the goose is one triangle gets stitched onto one side using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and one triangle will get stitched onto the other side using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When you've done that, I personally like to press the seams open and flat and cut any little ears off. Them there being the ears, it's that Van Gogh moment, all right? You will cut the ears off your patchwork, not the ears of yourself. So trim them off. Personally, I like to get rid of them because they can cause bulk in the seam. So seam pressing open and flat is useful. And let me just get my little pointer here. There we go. If we get the camera in really closely, the reason why I press the seam open and flat is, can you see there's a little V there? That's it. Brilliant. Well done, guys. The top of that V is in fact the top of the point on the right side of the fabric. Keep your camera exactly there. And that distance from the top of the point to the edge of the material should be a 1/4 inch. And it will be because the template makes it accurate. Right, how are we going to use the pieces for the geese? Round the border of the quilt, I've got 16 pink triangles and 12 green ones. I've also got 8 half square triangles which I've used on the corners. Don't worry your heads about that for the moment. Let me just demonstrate cutting out the geese. I'm going to cut green geese to begin with. From the remainder of the green fabric, I have got a 4.5 inch strip. And because I want to absolutely maximize my cutting and my fabrics, I'm cutting 2 at the same time. You could cut them singly, but this just saves a bit of effort. Place the goose template on the material. Now I cut a 4.5 inch strip, and you will see on the template there is, if I can get it there, I know you're going to have to watch this upside down, there is the 4.5 inch line. That 4.5 inch line is on one end of the fabric. The flat part of the template is on the other side of the material. Now, in order to maximize my fabric, I'm going to pull it in a bit from the end so that I've got enough room here to cut out another triangle using the other end of the template, a half square triangle to finish the goose off. You'll see why in a moment. Template on there, cut up the side, rather than cut towards you, flip the fabric over, replace the template there, cut again. And you'll need to go on doing this again and again and again until you have 12 green ones, and do the same with the pink fabric. Now, I mentioned keeping this end, and that's because to make the particular border I'm using, you will need to square it off some of these half square triangles using the blue part of the template. So from this end, I can now cut out a couple of accurate 4.5-inch triangles that will just fit. If I get it round the right way, there we go. I know you're out there waiting for me to make a mistake. I nearly made one. You know, they watch and then you email me afterwards saying, you did this on the show. I know these things, you know. Right, there are my 2 half square triangles, which are, of course, mirror images of each other. All this is in the PDF, which you can find either on JennieRayment.com or, of course, on the Quilting Classroom. What is now going to happen is I'm going to stitch the sections together, and you'll need to take 4 pink ones and 3 green ones, and they get sewn together in a line, a bit like this, and there isn't room to do absolutely everything. But you will stitch green and pink and green and pink and green and pink and green and pink until you have got a line. And there we have a line of greens and pinks stitched together. Let's get rid of those on the floor. Have to promise John I pick everything up afterwards. When you've done your line of green and pinks and green and pinks and green and pinks together, you have to finish it off. And at the end here, this is where I've stitched on my remaining triangles that I cut off, the ones for the corners. So I've finished and squared off the strip. So we've got 2 half square triangles and a whole load of geese that are stitched together. Panic not about when you sew the geese together, they actually sew together remarkably easily. Just let me very quickly show you how. Retrieve one from the floor where I threw it. And once more, when you come to sew it together, make sure you are consistent in what you do. So I've put the 2 pieces together, and you'll notice that the way that the template works is a bit sticks out this end and it's a bit short this end due to that flat end of the template, and that's what makes everything accurate, because you sew in where they cross, you sew out where they touch, and that will give you your 1/4 inch seam allowance. So just turn this round the other way, and I've just moved the stitches right there to the end. That's it. And so off your little scrap and down the edge. You will, of course, sit down to do it. So all you would do is to sew them together accurately using your 1/4 inch seam allowance, making sure they cross over at the top and a bit hangs out at the bottom, all the way down there. This will not be terribly well sewn, but of course you'll forgive me for it because it is Sunday morning and I got up at 2:45. That's it. There we go. It's the job, the dedication of the quilting tutor to the job. You should all be applauding like mad. And that's how you join them together. And then you'll sew the next pink one on here, etc., etc., until we end up with a strip. Right, strip. You'll have to make 4 of these, okay? So make 4 strips. Going back to my tablecloth, there is the tablecloth. I would then stitch one of the strips to one side, making sure that I have the pink to the tablecloth, okay? You can put it the other way around if you want, but I thought it looked better that way. And if when you sew it with this side up, you'll be able to see all the junctions in the seams where you go. And you will, of course, remember, and I'm reinforcing this bit of teaching, to cut the ears off the fabric, not yourself. Having stitched one strip to one side, one strip to the other side, you'll then need to add the corners. And when it comes to the corners, here you have a choice. What I did on the quilt here, because I was running a bit short of fabric, is I put half square corners. So I stitched 2 of those triangles together to make a square. You could have used just plain ordinary 4.5 inch squares to fill in the gap there. The choice is yours, whether you have a 4.5 inch plain square or whether you have 2 of these triangles stitched together. It might depend on the fabric. So basically what will then happen is you will stitch one strip onto one side, one strip onto the other side. To either end of the remaining strip you'll stitch a square, which will be 4.5 inches or exactly the width of that band, and that will then get sewn into that corner. stitched on there. Once you've done that, you'll have a certain amount of green fabric left. What I did with the green fabric that was left was to literally cut it into strips and just put it round the edge of the quilt to make a final border. So there was approximately a 2-inch border added all the way round the edge. Now that was fine and you could stop there. But I thought, hey, I've always wanted to use the scallop template. You know, I've looked at it and I've drawn around it, but I've never actually used it. Why don't I give this quilt a scallopy edge? So I got the scallop template. Now the Easy Scallop template itself actually does come with pretty good instructions on the back as to how you use it. But I will show you quickly how you actually use the scallop template. You get 2 sizes of the scallop template, a big one and a little one for making different sizes of scallops. And basically what happens is you decide on how many scallops you want and you draw around the edge of the scallop. Now, I didn't want a terribly deep scallop, so I simply adjusted the size so my scallop fitted between the tops of my flying geese. Had you got a larger border, you might have wanted to change the depth of the scallop like this. So if you take your scallop template, and let's go back to the quilt I have here with the plain border. You haven't got quite so many. Here's ones I did earlier samples this week, simply because being a granny, there wasn't time in between pushing grandchildren. God, isn't it difficult to push grandchildren? Particularly when you've got some funny plate on the back that one child stands on, you've not got it quite together. Oh dear. It was puffing, and aren't the swings lovely? And you know what the grandchildren do? They send me down the swing first to dry it off. Oh, not the swing, the slide. Mind you, being a bit muddled up between the slide and crawling through the tunnels, very hard on the knees. Anyway, when it comes to the scallop, use the scallop and decide how many scallops you actually want. And the way you work it out is you measure the piece of work. You deduct your seam allowances. So the piece of work measures 48.5 inches, which it might. Take off ½ an inch. That leaves you with 48. 48 is divisible by 3 lots of 16, which would be a horrible scallop. 16 threes, that would be really messy. Or 6 eighths or 8 sixes. So if you're going to say go for 8 inches, you simply slot the scallop together so it's on the 8-inch mark. And you place the scallop on the edge of the fabric and you would draw round the edge of the scallop and you move it down, move it down. A little hint. If you start drawing your scallops from the corners, when you get to the middle, if you have to fudge it because your mathematics weren't quite correct or it moved while you were drawing, you can make the centre scallop a little bigger or a little smaller. So by starting both ends, when you end up in the middle, you can adjust it. Makes life so much easier. Once you've got a scalloped edge, it's now round to binding it. And when it comes to binding any scalloped edge, you have absolutely 100% got to have your fabric cut on the bias. And there is just enough fabric left to cut it all out on the bias. An easy tool for cutting the fabric out on the bias is the bias ruler. And this is particularly good because it gives you an end that you can place on the fabric. For instance, here I have some strips of material I stitched together. And if I wanted to cut this on the bias, this is for the demonstration at 11 o'clock. Simply take the ruler and you want to put that angled edge down a straight side of the fabric. So let's turn it round that way. And that puts my ruler on the bias at 45 degrees, etc., etc. And I can simply cut up the edge there. The ruler does have graduations on it, and you can use the ruler to measure the various width of strips. So bias ruler, very useful. When you cut your bias binding, and there are a wide variety of different ways of cutting bias binding, you could use regular 2-inch wide bias binding cut out, which you have fed through the Simplicity head that comes with it. The nice way of doing this is that it gives you a crease to sew along. You might prefer, because some quilters like to do it, to actually make your binding using the quilting tip where you get the double folded bias binding. You might prefer to use your binding up out of all sorts of stripy bits, and again I'll show you on the 11 o'clock show how you can use the various heads if you join lots of strips together to get stripy binding. Now, when it comes to applying the binding, there's one important thing you need to be aware of, And that is, you do not cut the scalloped line until you have bound the quilt. So let's just get this together. When it comes to binding round the edge, you want to put the binding on so it follows the drawn line. When you come to an inward part, take it gently round. It will go round and drag slightly, and there'll be a very tiny little sort of crease in the fabric. Follow it round. So when I come down to the bit here, I shall come down to the section there and take it gently round the curve, trying to keep it on the curve at all times, and you will get this little bit just showing like that. Once you've gone all the way around the quilt, then you cut back to that scalloped edge. Do not cut back until you have stitched the binding on, and I'll come to how you join the ends together in just a moment. So once you've sewn all the way around there, then cut the quilt back to the edge of the binding. Do not use the rotary cutter because it's very easy to slip. Once you cut it back to the edge there, what I did with mine was I folded it over the front there, folded it to the back, pressed it well, and you'll find it'll actually just sort of squidge in there quite nicely. Get it squidged in there. And it'll look something like, here's one I did earlier, like this. It comes into a little pleat. On the back there, I simply turned the raw edge under, and you could either slip stitch it in place by hand, big yawn, or you could use the machine. And when you come to use the machine, one of the decorative fancy stitches would be very useful because it would literally cover any wobbles in the seam. Joining the ends together is not difficult because if you start off by leaving part of the bias unstitched, leave a tail, as you come round to the other end, let me just trim a little bit more of this off and you can see a bit more clearly. All I do then is fold the raw edge over, and my advice would be is start and finish on an arc. Take the other end, trim that one off so it lies just inside the first section, lie it in there and stitch straight past, and that, when you fold it back on itself, will give you a really nice neat edge. So there you go. That is the scalloped tablecloth. You've got the petal pattern, you've got the hearts, you've got the scalloped edge, you've got the fabulous fabric, you've learned how to do the pooky bits, and there you go. PDF is available either on my website, jennierayment.com, or the Quilting Classroom website. All the words are there. But of course, you've recorded it, haven't you? You may come back now, Genevieve.
Thank you, Jen.
And mind all the mess.
Inspiration. That was lovely. That was so lovely. Now, if you want to get anything that Jennie has been using in the show, in the classroom, it's all on the website also for you. All the W's, crakeandcraft.tv. Should we have a mosey down the counter?
I think we need to have a mosey down the counter.
Let's have a mosey down the counter. So first of all, a reminder of the fabric that Jennie was using. Beautiful, beautiful material here. All the details there for you. The English Tea Garden. These are, I mean, just seeing you use them,
they're really nice to
stunning.
work. They sewed well, they pressed well, they will wash well. It's great. You see, this is one of our tablecloths. Now, if you're worried about the seams, I just backed it.
Oh, right.
So before I bound it, I put a backing on it, and then and we use one of those all the time. You know, just ignore all the stains on it.
Absolutely
but
gorgeous.
That English Tea Garden tablecloth would be great. It'd be an heirloom, or you could make a small quilt.
Perfect. £15.29 is the price. 286558 is the item number.
Hey,
Then you have
77p.
And 77p, P&P. Thank you, Jennie. Thank you. And of course, you have the fat quarters as well if you want to go for these also. Don't forget the 11 o'clock show as well. These are going to be seen in lots more detail. 286559 is the item number there. £24.29 is the club price there. And don't forget, take advantage of that 77 pence P&P because, of course, that finishes tonight. So make sure you take advantage of it. Now we're going on to your easy square and your easy rule. So now we're getting into the tools.
Yes, you are into tools. Now, these are great. If you've not got the space, and you saw me using the long ruler, it is difficult in a small space. That's a great one to have a small space. Also great to come for class. You've got 12.5 inches by 6.5 inches, marked out in 1/8 of an inch intervals. It's got the 45-degree line should you wish to make an angle cut. It's also got a 30-degree line. So great for scripts, and that's great for little easy squares.
287094 is the item number. £22.49 and 77 pence P&P. Now we're going on one too. This
Smaller
is
version. This is the sneaky one. You sneak in quick. Either you take
yes.
class. I mean, I'm going out to New Zealand tomorrow, so I will have one of those in my bag.
you off to New Zealand?
Yeah, I know, teaching. You've got something to cut round, and it's just small enough and light enough to slip into my carry-on, and nobody knows it's there. So great bit of kit, that.
both of these £17.09 also. So you're using this as well.
Yeah, very
now this
good
is the
shape,
petal
that.
and the scallop here.
Yes.
This is great, isn't it? I
think
haven't seen this
super.
one before.
Haven't you?
No.
No, it's real fun because it's fun for everybody. You don't have to be a patchwork person to use that. It can be your cushions, it can be a decoration on a bag, it can be tablecloth, you can make table mats out of it, and this gives you that scalloped edge. I mean, think of curtains with a scalloped edge.
Oh, yes.
Or the flounce along the top, the pelmet with a scalloped edge.
Oh,
so
beautiful.
that isn't just for patchwork, it's for anybody. A dress, a frock, scalloped edge, why not?
Why not? Absolutely. If you do want to go for this today, £24.29 is the price there. And don't forget that P&P. Do take advantage of it also. Now, Jenny was also using the bias ruler and your piping wizard as well.
That I'll show them in the show.
So this is going to be on at 11?
Yes, on the next show, because that is very good for trimming your piping off level. And that, of course, you can use to cut the piping. Or indeed your bias binding to go in the bias binding maker.
And there's 2 flexi pays on this, so take advantage of that also. So £15.75 get it home for with 77 pence P&P. Do you think I mentioned that? If you do want to go for this, you've opened a flexi basket then for anything else you want to get
You
in
can
the
shove
show
it all in, you
also.
see,
Yes,
put the whole
it
lot
all
in, fabric, everything can go in the basket.
Go shopping, put it all in the basket and divide it by 2 and pay 77 pence per item to get it home. 9-piece accessory kit here. Jenny, talk us through
Right,
this.
very quickly, you've got the vanishing pen.
Yes.
You've got masking tape. You've got your long basting needles, brilliant for sewing not only curtains together, tacking up your quilts. There's your bamboo
Oh,
point.
there it is.
I wouldn't be
Yes.
without mine there. You've got invisible thread. Now, brilliant if you want to stitch around something that's multicoloured. That would have been very good for finishing off hemming the quilt, the tablecloth on the machine. Hand sewing, it's a little difficult. Pins, fantastic. Love the pins. And then you've got the 4 pencils. One is great because it's a template marking pencil for using with, if you need to make your own templates. The other 3 do the various different colours of fabric. So fantastic that. And this is safety conscious. This is a needle keeper.
Oh, yes.
When your needles are in there, they are in there and they don't fall out, which means your grandchildren, your children cannot get a needle in their foot, because I had that happen to my brother.
Oh,
yes.
that is painful.
Yes, I now get walloped by my mother as well. Those were in the days when you got walloped.
287190 is the item number there for you, and at £15.29 is the price. Put it in your flexi. I'm saying walloped. Now we've got the easy square and easy rule, the larger size here for you also. And the details coming up for you. Now this is also on flexi paid for you, so you've got 2 payments of £21 and 60 pence. 250371 is the item number. Great to have this also, isn't it?
That's the beginning set. If you can afford it, and let's face it, 77p P&P, how can't you? That is how I would start. You need that, you need the cutter, you need the mat, and we've got the cut and the mat as well.
We do have the cutting mat also, and the details we will give you on the screen very, very shortly also. Lots more for you. my producer just went, da, 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 da. There it is. 259.
77p.
Exactly. There are all the details there for the cutting machine that you've been seeing. Jenny using 259153. Da, 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 da. 22.49 is the price. And of course, I want to bring you back to something lots of you are going for right now. 77 pence to have it delivered. We like the idea of this silver, don't we? Lots of you
It
going
is
for
a
this.
nice machine. It's a
lovely.
super little machine. And particularly the fact, from a quilting point of view, you can have a 1/4 inch, it can drop its feed dogs, you've got tension on your thread, you have width control, length control on the various stitches, dead easy to use. It sews like a dream, drop in bobbin. You've got room here to put another bobbin so you can do twin needle work. What else can I talk to you about? No, I think it's a nice machine. It's light, it's not going to break your back. It comes with threading instructions on it so you can see how to thread it. A little box there that you can put all your various bits and pieces in. No, I'm impressed with that.
It's great. We only launched this. It was only about a couple of weeks ago, actually. I think it was about 2 weeks ago when we launched this. It's been very, very popular since we have. It's the silver 1080. Now you've got 4 flexi pays on this, which is great. So £47 and 2p to be precise. And also remember that 77 pence P&P. So you've got a computerised there. Very easy to choose all of your stitches. 1080 because you've got the 80 stitches there as well. You've got the width as well and the length, so you can change the stitches as you please also. Look at how easy that is to use. Got scallop stitching in there, you've got the castle
So the
stitching
green
in
light here shows me the row I'm on,
Yep.
and the dot here shows me the stitch I'm on. So read across, boom, got it.
Perfect.
And then you can change all your settings here and here.
And easy threading as well. on
Easy
this
thread.
one
It's
too,
got
right?
a needle thredder too.
It's got a needle thread.
Yes,
And that I
yeah.
mean, for a machine like this at the price that you're seeing there.
77p, and that price, actually, it is, I'm sorry.
It is,
I've done this
absolutely.
before, but I actually am taking this one.
Oh.
I'm sorry, this one's gone.
Right, so
All right.
so that's one. That
I'm
one's
not
gone.
giving you 77p either.
That one's gone. Jenny's got that one, but if you want to get one, here are the details.
It's jolly
there.
sturdy too.
272089 is the item number. One more thing I want to mention is the Goose template also. Jenny's been using this throughout the show as well. 264456 is the item number. £20 and 69 pence is the price, and that comes with the crazy tool.
And we'll demo the
also.
crazy one at 11 o'clock. It's somewhere underneath this mess.
It's
There it
underneath.
is.
There it is. We found
and there's
it.
a goose and there's a crazy. So you can get simply crazy with a flying goose.
We love it.
Or you can do your flying goose simply crazily.
Now, if you want to order anything, all the W's, crateandcraft.tv, are on the phones, 09056480480. Don't forget to take advantage of that P&P today. It's belonged to our Smash Hits event here, but it finishes tonight. If you want to get your hands on the silver sewing machine, it's really busy right now for this as well, so do make sure that you order that as quickly as you can. Some people have their hands in it already, as you can see. Jenny, you're coming back up at 11 o'clock,
I'm indeed, yes.
so we will join you then.
Yes.
Just as anyone out there thinking about, will they even start quilting or start
Right,
making,
you
what
need
would you say?
a ruler, a square,
Yeah.
a mat and a cutter. And from there you can do absolutely everything. Then you can add to it with all the various other fancy stuff and the interesting templates, but you need a ruler. I like the big one, but if you can't afford it or there isn't space, have the smaller one. You need one of those, a mat, a cutter, and then you're off. And of course, a sewing machine if you want to machine. That's speed.
And a classroom always helps too. Now, everything is on the website, and we would suggest you get it now. So at 11 o'clock, you know that you've got all the equipment coming to you, all the beautiful materials coming to you as well. And at 11 o'clock, sit with Jenny and enjoy the show also. It's been an absolute pleasure to have your company.
They've been
Jenny,
good.
Thank
They've
you.
been really good.
They've been very
they
good
didn't
students.
talk once
No,
or
I know.
interrupt, and no one stuck their hand up and said, "Ear." See ya.
Bye-bye.